It's Skater of the Year season, and to celebrate that, I'd like to take a second to recommend Tony Hawk's Tapes You Leave Behind part over on the Thrasher YouTube channel. It's a really emotional video. The whole Bones Brigade got together to make it, and as a fan it hit me really hard to see so many legends just banging it out like they aren't a day older. Today, we're gonna play Thrasher, Skate, and Destroy for the PS1. Thank you to everybody who suggested this. I wanted to cover it in the future, but the volume of requests and references to it made me really curious about it, and I'm always in the mood for more skateboarding. Let's get started. Thrasher, Skate, and Destroy, developed by Z-Axis and published by Rockstar in 1999, is the very first skateboarding simulation game. Prior to this, skateboarding video games really only existed in the form of ridiculous fantasy arcade stuff that let you perform inhuman feats, or racing games, and most of them were racing games for some reason. So this game came out and filled a void for a lot of real-world skaters who wanted something closer to real life. In the world of video games, there wasn't any real critical consensus on whether or not this game was good. Some outlets loved it, some outlets thought it was mid and needed better technology, and some outlets totally hated it. Personally, this game is a little bit before my time, and nobody I knew had it growing up. I found out about it when a buddy of mine gave me a stack of old-ass Electronic Gaming Monthly magazines, and I remember looking around for a copy at our local Hastings a few times, but I was never able to come up on it locally. So this is something I'm actually pretty excited to try. The career mode here is a huge step away from everything we've seen so far. Instead of the goal system I've become so adjusted to, this game focuses entirely on score. The only goal is to get a high score above the requirement and then skate to an exit. If you get the score you need, you move on to the next skate spot. There are 12 levels in total, and the amount of score you need usually depends on the size and complexity of the level. It's very oversimplified, but I don't have a problem with that. This game is not about doing objectives, which is emphasized by starting every level in free skate mode. The idea is to learn everything you can about your tricks and the spot before you do a high score run. And because this game is so complex, it actually makes a lot of sense that way. In the way of gameplay, this is really weird. It's not like anything I've ever played before, so I have no direct comparison I can draw with the controls. Holding cross while on the flat kicks you to give you momentum. The momentum feels a little weird at first, but it's easy to get used to and it isn't that bad after a few minutes. Holding square on the flat preps an ollie. Holding triangle preps a flip trick, and holding circle preps a spin. You can change what flip trick or spin you're doing by pressing and holding a direction just before releasing the trick buttons. You can also change the tricks by holding the left shoulder before a trick before an ollie and adding the right shoulder to change between front side and back side. Tapping cross just above a rail will start a grind, and you can also modify the grinds in flip trick out. As the game progresses, you unlock more tricks like extra flips, grabs, and grinds, wall rides, inverts, and a lot more. Successfully finishing a level will usually reward you with multiple tricks at a time to make your next run a little bit better. There are also double trick buttons, like being able to do a 180 kickflip by holding circle and triangle at the same time. This game rewards you for getting better by giving you more to mess around with, and I like that a lot. The game is constantly incentivizing you to keep going because you can do more stuff every time you move on. There's a good variety of street and vert tricks, and there's a really great simulation feel to the whole thing. But I'm gonna be totally real for a minute. Once you figure out how everything works, the simulation aspect gets totally thrown out the window. This game has just as much tech fantasy as every other skateboard video game because that's just how video games work. You can still chain together a ridiculous amount of grinds and tricks in this game if you do it right, and that totally breaks the simulation vibe that the game is going for. Depending on what character you pick, you might have to do some extra work by manually landing tricks with the square button. But Scab here has the highest landing stat of the whole roster, and that makes this game way less sim and a lot more fantasy. You pretty much never have to manually land with this character. At the end of every high score run, you'll get chased down by an NPC that you're warned about when the level starts. It can be a cop with a taser, or a mugger with a bat, or a dog that just doesn't like skaters. If you get caught, you'll fail the level regardless of whether or not you hit the target score. If you manage to get to an exit, or you put a big enough distance between you and the NPC, you'll successfully finish the level with whatever score you have. This can be a good opportunity to get a couple of extra tricks in if you're just shy of the target score. Sometimes though, the NPC will spawn in a stupid place or get caught on something in such a way that you instantly get away. It's cool when it works, but it doesn't always work. It also isn't in every map. The contest maps don't have any NPC that chases you, which sucks because a fan that chases you down would have been hilarious. The last major gameplay mechanic is the health bar. When you start a run, you'll be given a health bar that decreases if you fall down. Depending on how insane the fall is, you may lose a little or a lot of health. When your health reaches 0, your board breaks and you have to start over again. Falling in water and stuff will instantly break your board, so probably don't go swimming. Visually, Skate and Destroy is definitely a PS1 game, but there are a lot of interesting things going on here. Some of you in the comments pointed out to me that this is originally where the ragdoll physics in freestyle BMX come from, and you're dead on. The ragdoll physics in this game are almost identical to the first freestyle BMX, but you can still tell that this was made first. Some of the reactions are kind of janky, and there's a lot more polygon spazzing than there is in freestyle BMX. That said, it looks a lot better than BMX XXX. The map designs in this game are interesting, to say the least. Like I said earlier, there are 12 maps in total. The scale and complexity of the maps gradually gets bigger as time goes on, and there's a good variety to all of it. My biggest complaint is that some of them just are not made very well. The object placement in this game is just really bad a lot of the time. There are all kinds of inclines in random spots, which can be really inconvenient a lot of the time. There are spots with fun boxes built against walls in a way that don't make them useful at all. Some of the rail collision is broken in a very similar way to freestyle BMX 2, and that really drags some of the levels down. On the plus side, the maps actually gradually get better as time goes on, with the exception of the San Francisco Hills. That level is really mid, and I think the developers knew that. It's the first level to ask for less score because it's just too fucked up to play normally. It's a hill bomb, so there's really not much you can do in the way of tricks. My strategy to get past it was do a 540 grab trick over this one kicker and then get the rest of the score in the one half pipe at the bottom of the map. It was simple, but it worked, and I didn't want to hate the map because I spent too long on it. The best part of the visuals in this game is the skater movement. Kicking, grabs, flips, and grinds all look incredibly fluid for the time, albeit they're not exactly totally accurate. It reminds me a lot of a modern Rockstar game, but a whole decade before they took on that style. It's stunningly impressive for the hardware in the generation. The last thing I want to mention here visually is the design of Venice. This keeps coming up. I've heard from a few pro skater fans that Venice is awesome not because it's a well-made map, but because it historically preserves a skate spot that doesn't exist anymore. That's definitely true, and Pro Skater captures the accuracy really well, but it just isn't fun in that game, to me. The version of Venice in Skate and Destroy is a little bit less accurate to the real world, but because of the simulation style, it works so much better. This right here is the confirmation I needed. Venice absolutely could have been a better map in Pro Skater, but they opted to ignore the fun and focus on the realism for just that one map, and it hurts the experience. Skate and Destroy does it perfectly. They captured most of the accuracy without ever interfering with the fun, and it just works. The style of gameplay just better fits the scenario. The soundtrack here is really unique. The theme of it is stuff you might hear in a Thrasher skate video, and it consists entirely of rap and hip-hop tracks. There are some names I recognize here, like Eric B. and Rakim, A Tribe Called Quest, Gangstar, Run DMC, and the Sugar Hill Gang. It was awesome to hear Don't Sweat the Technique come up on the list, because that's a song I recognized from Aggressive Inline. I actually used that song in that video. One thing's for sure, Z-Axis had really good taste in music, whether the soundtracks were short or not. This one's actually a little bit longer than some of the others, but it's still pretty short when you compare it to games from the Activision O2 lineup. The last thing I want to talk about here is the skate footage. Like almost every other action sports game, Skate and Destroy has a really good variety of real-world skateboarding footage to break things up. There's the footage at the opening like always, but in this game, finishing a contest level will award you with a really quick burst of skateboarding footage to remind you that there is a real world out there, and you could be really skating instead of sitting on your ass playing video games. My one complaint here is that the compression is really bad, even by PS1's low standards, so it isn't really that great to watch. Like, of every other game I've seen on the PS1, this is some of the worst video compression ever. It's painful on the eyes. With all of that said, I'll give Thrasher Skate and Destroy a rating of 7 out of 10. I like this game, despite its many flaws. Yeah, it isn't the most perfect or well-made skateboarding simulator ever, but it tries and succeeds at a lot of things. It can be really hard to play, and janky to adapt to, especially by today's standards. But this is one of those really rare moments where I feel like adapting to it was worth it. It's an extremely impressive and interesting game with a lot of ideas that would live on in games in the future. I wouldn't really recommend it to anybody today. It's not a game made for everybody, and it's a surprise to me that I like it so much because I'm way more adjusted to the Tony Hawk series style of gameplay. But I think that's why I like this so much. This isn't just some Pro Skater clone with a couple of changes to make it look new. This is a completely unique game, and it's still the only game to do some of the things that it does. There are better skateboarding sim games out there, so probably play one of those instead, but I'm damn glad that I finally played this. It feels like I crossed one of the most important games off of my bucket list. Now that I'm done with that, there are a few more requests I want to take before I move on to American Wasteland. I'm getting there, but American Wasteland is a little bit longer and a lot more complex than the rest of the series, so it's going to take a little bit of extra time. That doesn't mean we're breaking away from the skateboarding yet though. There is one game that keeps getting suggested, and I think what I'll have to say about it might surprise a few of you. So until next time, thank you, and have a nice day.